Hi, this is a presentation on managing class energy. My name is David LaHeist. Please watch this with the sound on. Question: is there such a thing as cognitive potential energy? This kind of energy that allows you to do more complex cognitive tasks. I think there is, and that's something that we can control. So I was thinking about managing the energy in the classroom, and I think, well, who else manages group energy? And I came to the conclusion that the most obvious one is a DJ. Tyler Hicks here, he's a DJ, and he made this playlist for weddings. And what he did is he said, okay, well, we'll start with a medium song. These are beats per minute. And then we'll go a little bit faster and faster song. Everybody's dancing, having a good time. So then I'll give them a little bit of a break. And then we'll go faster, 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 and then give them a little bit of a break. Now, this is a 3-hour list, and so, for every 1 hour, there's about 3 peaks. Even in a 1.5 hour thing, like Star Wars, for example, we see peaks and valleys where we've got this kind of intense moment where Alderaan is destroyed, and then we let the audience chill out a little bit when Luke is with Yoda in the swamp. And then that's getting us ready for this really kind of intense moment with the Death Star. There is peaks and valleys, and it's not just getting more and more intense as it goes. There's a general tendency to that, but it's very important to have these little valleys in there in order to have a good pace. It also happens for a really, really long time, something like a game like Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. This is over many, many hours of gameplay that this level is hard, and then it gets a little bit easier, and then it gets harder, and it's not progressively harder, but it definitely has, after they've invested some time into the game, it gets quite a bit harder. But then they need, a bit of an easier time in order to do it. And of course, the last levels are going to be very, very difficult because, it's a game like that. But it's interesting, actually. Amateur game designers tend to have level 1 is very easy, and level 2 is harder, 3 is harder, and it just gets harder and harder and harder until the person just kind of gives up and says, I'm not going to play this anymore, But if you have another game, say, for example, like Angry Birds, it's getting harder and harder and harder, but then they give you a new bird, and the new bird makes everything easy. And then, it gets harder and harder and harder. And then, there's an easy level. Okay. And then, you're getting new birds and it's becoming easier and harder and the same sort of thing. And then the person will continue to go along. They'll keep going with it. So the question, when we're making a curriculum, are we making it go harder and harder and harder? Or are we letting them have an easy lesson or two so that maybe they can process the... Sorry, my cats are fighting. So are we giving them an easy lesson so they can process that harder lesson, Giving them a little bit of an easier time just so that they can, get through. Maybe some of the students have to review this while the lesson's a little bit easy. Giving them that confidence because they don't have the choice to give up. Or if they do, it's got really, really bad consequences because then they just get left behind, which is, I think, the case in a lot of English lessons. But people say, I'm a teacher, I'm not an entertainer. You're talking about video games, you're talking about movies, these are entertainment. I'm not an entertainer. And that's true. An entertainer's goal is to make people happy. And we're teachers, we're not there to make them happy, we're there to make them focus. Because there's so much information out there that they have access to, we have to focus their information on the right stuff. And so we need to get their focus, and then we need to give that focus to something else. And that's what our job is. School used to be awesome. Remember when it was awesome? Now, question, when does school stop being fun? I think it's when results outweigh the process. A long time ago when the process was more important than the product, then we have macaroni art and we're just enjoying our time and we're learning about how to use crayons and learning how to use the tools so we can create some kind of product. But it's not really important. Now, if the product was really important, then, okay. Then we're trying to create some amazing thing and, we're working at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to make a little bit more postmodern work with the vermicelli, and it's not any fun. Sure, the product is good, but we're not having any fun anymore. So I think that focusing on results, we end up with this kind of lesson that we say we don't have time. For example, maybe you're interested in Harry Potter, but it's 223 pages, so you'll settle for the movie. It's 2 hours and 39 minutes. No, that's enough time that I'll give it to you. But imagine you're some kind of weirdo and you say, oh, no, that's too much time. I'm just going to read the Wikipedia. Nobody does that, right? Nobody would just read the Wikipedia plot summary because that's just the information. This kind of we don't have time teaching, this is what it looks like.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley...
So what's cut out with just the information, right? He's just giving information there. Well, there's no investment in the characters. There's no understanding of how one event led to the next. There's no reader questioning, oh, what's going to happen next? Or why the conclusion was meaningful. That teacher from Ferris Bueller, he's just telling all the conclusions, but he's not giving any story behind why those conclusions were reached or why the tariffs were higher or lower or anything like that. So he's cutting out everything that's meaningful or interesting and just giving the information. And that is what when somebody says, well, we don't have time, well, that's probably what's going to get cut, is the interesting stuff. Imagine if we were trying to teach Star Wars, but we have to teach it in school, and in school they say, oh, well, all you need to know for the test is that Luke used the Force instead of his targeting computer. Well, if you don't know the stuff that happened at the beginning, then it's just kind of it's a fact, but it's not interesting. So remember, don't cut out the context, don't cut out the characters, don't cut out the reason why we know what we know. We can increase the potential energy of almost anything in the classroom. As a matter of fact, I think that probably while I'm talking, you are mentally trying to do this maze, or probably you've already done it because it's very easy. That is because people like an achievable challenge. I think that that's kind of the appeal of games. That's why your brain wanted to do that maze, because it was achievable. And it's just a little bit of a challenge. There's a lot of different things in the classroom that we can have achievable challenges, and we can have more context and so on. Lectures, worksheets, tests, pair work, speeches, group work, board games, card games, creating something. Now I put tests in parentheses because we don't really want to mess with those. There's a certain expectation of what a test is, and if you mess with it too much, then people are going to say that it's not fair. So I don't tend to be very bold on my way of doing a test, except to try and have a lot of long answers instead of just yes or no or A, B, C, D. So anyway, let's talk about how we can optimize all of these different things. Now, there's a lot of different ways that we can optimize lectures. For example, we can think about the aha moments. A stand-up comic, he thinks about how many laughs per minute he can get. I try to think about how many ahas can I get. Don't tell them spoilers. It's just like a movie or a book or something. Let them solve the mystery. Let them find out what the question is. Imagine that maze, and if I had given my son the maze and said, here you go, here's a maze. Oh, I've already done it for you. There's nothing interesting about that. You have to solve it for yourself. Participation, that means willful and not in front of everybody. Demonstrating knowledge is not interesting to people. If you're saying, anyone, nobody wants to demonstrate their knowledge because that makes you some kind of nerd or teacher's pet or something. That's no good. But helping is good. So if you create some task where the knowledgeable people can help others with their knowledge, then that's good. You've created a task and somebody says, oh, you know the answer, please help me out. They look cooler, they look better, they're helpful. Everybody appreciates their knowledge and they're not just showing off. So when you're thinking about class participation, make sure that person that you're asking is actually helping the class, helping their group, whatever, and not just simply demonstrating their knowledge. Familiar places, people, etc., always make a lecture more interesting. And of course, surprises, silliness, dark humor, mistakes, lies. I won a Pulitzer Prize for my lies in 1986. So, optimizing worksheets. This is something where we can make the worksheets that we use just a little bit better if we just think about it the right way. Be critical of a worksheet's purpose. For example, what purpose does a word search have? I mean, do a crossword instead, and you still have the spelling, and you also have a basic definition that you can start working from. The word search just does the basic spelling, and that's not that interesting. Are 20 problems really better than 10? Is this a worksheet that I should split into 2 worksheets, and then, after they've done another task, to build up some energy, maybe I'll give them the next 10 or something like that? I think if there's too many problems on your worksheet, then it just looks so taxing and people just give up before they even try. Or it just loads down the class and you can't even get the energy for the next task. The language practice needs to be a means to the end, like solving a puzzle, telling a story, learning about something. And I'll show you some examples of this. And of course, we try to include an area for expression and sharing. Very, very important. Here's an example of dark humor. We've got all of these accident-prone children who bad things are going to happen to them. No, this is already kind of interesting. We have 8 predictions. The little boy is going to fall in the hole. Going to is the topic. Well, we can give them an opportunity to use their own language by saying, okay, and he's going to break his leg. I want you to complete these sentences, and you probably have to use different paper, but complete the sentence, but then use going to tell us what kind of injury is going to happen and what's going to happen next. And of course, you give these to children, and they love making up injuries, and they love the grotesque and dark humor, and they love comparing how dark could they make it. And that is motivating for them, and that's going to make this worksheet give them energy for another more difficult cognitive task. Here, instantly, I see there's a story. Oh, I don't know what this is. There seems to be sharks and kind of action and stuff. That gives me some kind of incentive to fill out the story because I want to know what happened in this story. And then, of course, we want some kind of way for them to express, so we have to write an ending to the story on the back, and then boom, we've got something that we can compare. And they have the opportunity to be creative or interesting. Here's just a maze of opposites: to stop, to start, to laugh, to cry. Now that you know how the maze works, you probably want to complete it. I'm not going to let you because I have to keep going. There's 3 types of pair work as well. We use mechanical practice games in language. We use interviewing and gap fill activities. Well, let's talk about mechanical practice. It's just repeating. And so you need to have some kind of game in order to make that repeating interesting. And this is an example of a mechanical practice game that we often use. We have a secret. We say, okay, I work out at night. I study in the evening. We make some secret, and then our partner guesses. And they say, do you work out in the afternoon? And you say, no. It's not interesting because it's just luck. But we can use, if we just cut out this whole bottom of the board and we just use the top, then what we can do is we could play tic-tac-toe. Only instead of regular tic-tac-toe, we're doing connect 4 tic-tac-toe, where they need to get 4 in a row, and it's pretty infinite, the board, so, or large anyway. So we say, do you get up in the morning? Okay, and the next person says, do you get up early? Okay, and the first person says, do you finish class early? And then the other person wants to block it. They say, do you eat dinner late? So we're still using the language, but it's not luck-based. Pure luck is not an interesting way to win. Okay, so take, for example, this worksheet for a interview sort of activity. Do you used to go to cram school? Yes, no, yes. Is this interesting? No, it's not, because it's just yes or no questions, and there's no chance for expression. So how do we change it to something more interesting? Well, what if I said, instead of writing the person's answer, you have to write a follow-up question. For example, like, do you have a pet? Do you have a pet? Yes, I do. Well, what pet do you have? Okay, but the student too has to be a different follow-up question. Do you have a pet? No. Oh, which pet do you want? I can't draw with this thing. And then the third person, do you have a pet? And they say, no. And they, do you not like pets? Any kind of thing. But you have to have 3 different follow-up questions. Now it's interesting. Now there's some kind of challenge can I make 3 follow-up questions? Did you play with dolls? Did you used to play with dolls? Oh, well, that's very, very difficult to make follow-up questions. And of course, they should answer the follow-up questions as well. Here's a great activity where there's no words at all that are set, and they have to really creatively describe, is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? They have to use all of their language skills. People like a challenge. This is a real challenge. And students enjoy this. This is a great book, Back and Forth, that just has a whole bunch of these kinds of things. And they challenge themselves to use the language that they already know to say, is it 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, don't let it go too long, but just let them try each one a little bit. And that'll be a lot of fun. Now, we have this activity for kind of like going around and meeting different people. Is this interesting? Not really. I mean, you can, give them these kind of funny names, let them have the funny names, but you should get them more creative where they can come up with changes to these. They should change it to be kind of obscene or crazy or whatever, but, or they can try to see how many people can have the same answer. So try to choose what job do you think almost everybody's going to choose. And then when you go to interview people, you can find out how many people chose the same job, or something like that. You can do all kinds of different things, but just giving them the identity and giving them this blank, there's nothing really interesting about the information that they're gathering. So although I love reward, it's just, this is not a very interesting activity. Optimizing group work. Group work, I talk about board games, card games, and there's some other communication games, and there's role plays. We can optimize these. Here's your general board game. Now, this is a terrible game. I'm sorry for the Judith Blair down here, but it's a terrible game because, well, we have this go forward, go back, and that's kind of something, but again, it's luck-based. It's just luck of the dice whether or not they're going to advance, And then all of these are yes, no. Are you allowed to take exams? Yes. Is that an interesting answer? Is there really any challenge or expression in that? Not really. So is this a game that really should exist? No. These sort of questions are the questions that we want the students to ask. So if you had the answers, yes, no, maybe, sometimes, whatever, then the person has to come up with that. If you have something a little bit challenging, for example, in this game that I've made, based on intermediate vocabulary games by Jill Hadfield, amazing book, I just put all of the different pictures on here, and if they don't know what this is, then they have to go back however many spots. Now it's not just luck, there's some language going on. And of course we've got go back 4 spaces, but we've also got these things like make a funny face or pretend to die, things that when they land on those spots, it increases the class energy, And then of course they draw me, and by seeing the drawings, I know that they're getting pretty close to the end and that, I can control this. It's kind of the same as a snakes and ladders game, or, if this looks too childish, you could do the exact same game with different symbology, where it's just kind of go forward and go back. But again, this you're just winning by luck. Now, what if I changed the rules and said, okay, when you roll the dice, and by the way, always make them do the language before they roll the dice, because if you do it the other way, then you're making it so that the cognitively difficult task happens after the kind of fun thing. You want the fun to be after the difficult task during a game. So say the language, roll the dice, boom, 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 boom. Well, what if I change the rules and I say, roll the dice, and then you can move anybody's piece but your own? Now it becomes interesting. I've got some choices. Am I going to run my friend into a snake just to be a bad person? Am I going to help my other friend move across the board? Is there going to be some faction? Is there going to be some kind of begging to help or whatever? This makes it a little bit more fun because they've got more choices and there's a social aspect of it. If you've got more choices, for example, this board game, I've got a choice of an upper and a lower. And you can make a rule that, if you meet some other player, You can't, they'll block you or they'll try to block you, but you have to do rock, paper, scissors in order to change positions so that you can continue or something like that. Make your own rules, but just adding 2 tracks, suddenly it's a much more interesting game than if it was just a single track. More choices makes a better game. And then, of course, instead of a start and end, you can do a collect and challenge type. Here, we've got so many different choices. We go to and we want to collect all of these different cards, with language on the back, and you could just paste this into the middle of the card or whatever. When you meet another player, then you can, rock, paper, scissors, challenge them to collect one of their cards that they've already collected. And the person to first get a certain number of cards, either through battling or through just going around the board. Oh, well, then this is an interesting game because there's a social aspect to it. And there's a lot of freedom about how they want to accomplish the task. You can even do a very easy one where all of the paths are kind of infinite. You put all of these different things on one side and then all of the other language on the other, and we've got this 2-dimensional thing. Spend, she. This may be a past tense. She spent a lot of money. Or maybe you can do it question, how much did she spend? Whatever your language, if you just have verbs on one side and agents on the other, then there's a lot of different things that we can do with this. You roll the dice, and you go across, you collect the coins as you go, and of course, if you land on another player, you rock, paper, scissors to try to steal their money. That's quite easy. It's quite fun. Here's a little tip. If you don't have a dice, use a pencil. How about that? And how about this? Why 2 dice or pencils are better than 1. Let's take a look at that. If you have 2 dice, then you got more 7s, a lot of 7s, and then just a few, 6s and 8s, and then it just you get very, very rarely does somebody get a 2, and that's very funny, and very rarely does somebody get a 12. But what it does is it normalizes it, it makes it a close game. No longer is it an equal odds to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's very unequal odds. Most people get a normal roll, and occasionally they get something terrible or wonderful. And that's more emotionally charging than just, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So 2 dice is better than 1. But I'll tell you something, 0 dice is better than 2. If you put the language into categories of easy, okay, or hard, look, we have another choice that we can make. If you make it so that they have to move back if they make a mistake, then I might do the easy ones. I might try a hard one, and then there's a lot of suspense. Are they going to get a really hard one and they don't know the answer and they have to move back 6 spots? More choices, more suspense. That makes the game more interesting. So finally, we have these card games, things like Uno. Whenever possible, scheming is better than waiting for a turn. If you're just waiting for the next turn, that's not so interesting and you're not really thinking through the language. Adding penalties, adding unpredictable combinations. These are great. The penalties of Uno is what makes Uno interesting. And of course, card matching. These, I think they should self-check. For example, dominoes make a circle, and they also half the number of cards when you make a dominoes. When I do dominoes like this, where, I have got all of these. This is at a medical university, by the way. I put these things on the side so that when they match all of these things up, boom, they spell out the word hello. This is interesting to them. They start to see that the cards are making a letter, and then they start to see all of the letters coming together, and then they have to figure out, this is how they all do it. You can find these cards or the template for these cards at the website that I'll put at the end. Here's another one with 16 pieces. If you don't like that many pieces, this is super easy to cut. And what you see is on the ends, we have a lot of red herrings that are going to fit. So they're going to seem to fit together, and then it's going to be more difficult, and they keep on making the same connections. This is kind of a mechanical practice game where they're making the same connections again and again and again. It's very frustrating. It's very difficult, actually, to come up with this exact combination. It's a really hard puzzle. So sometimes what I do in the medical university is I use this one where I've put in hidden letter numbers. So this is G-O-O-D. It's hidden. good, hard work. And then if they get really, really difficult, and they say, I can't do it, I just say, oh, well, just remember, it's good, hard work. Eventually, they'll figure out the puzzle, and they'll put it together, and then we can move on to the next activity. But it's self-checking. Now, here's a kind of a card game that's quite interesting, where any one of these matches any one of these with just one word. There's only one word that is the same. For example, for this one and this one, the same word will be, you probably find it before I do because I'm really bad at this game. What is the word that matches? B. So B is here, B is here. So you could do a lot of these. This is called Spot It or Dobble. And there's a lot of different ways, if you look at the Spot It Dobble site, a lot of different ways you can use this. But you can use it for almost any grammar that alters the verb. Very, very good. Now let's talk about what I consider to be kind of a perfect game. This is, to me, a perfect game. Why is it perfect? Because it doesn't really need a whole lot, and it invites a lot of creativity. What you do is you take a little dice, put it in a cup, or they roll the dice, and they look. Nobody else can see the dice in the group. And the person says, for example, I am a boy, and the three boys raise their hand, and then they can move the dice on to the next person if it's a 3, Now, what happens, what's funny about this is if there's a 3 and they say, I am a boy, the first time maybe the 3 boys raise their hands. But then if it's a 3 again and somebody else says, well, I am a boy, they know that they're going for the number 3. So maybe one of the boys will say, well, I'm a girl. It's inviting that kind of lying. It's inviting them to try to anticipate who's going to tell a lie. And it becomes tremendous fun for almost any language target to try to get them to lie about themselves with this very, very simple, no preparation game. And of course, if you get all of these different dice with a different number of students, as low as 4, so that would be 3 other people at the table, and as many as 20, but or 90, but probably not going to be using the D20 on this game. Anyway, what to remember? The results will come if you focus on the process. Just focus on the process, make the process interesting, and they will reach the conclusion that the result is interesting. Remember, you're the DJ. You have to read your class and have options. Are they too tired that you need to build them up a little bit before they can do it? No DJ is going to start with the limbo at a children's party. You got to build them up to that. Think about your teaching the same way. And then finally, your students have nearly infinite information and just as many distractions. Your job is to focus them on what they need to be focusing on. Thomas Friedman actually said, your boss doesn't care what you know because the Google machine knows everything. Your boss cares about what you can do with what you know. That's the only thing your boss will pay you for. And that's interesting because that is talking about not results, but process. In the future, how we educate our children may prove to be more important than how much we educate them. Another great quote by Thomas Friedman. Now this also I think has to do with let's focus on the process and not just the results. Anyway, if you would like to contact me, this is my email. I know I use Hotmail, but you can also use my Rocket Mail if you'd prefer. Gamesforteaching.weebly.com has this and many other games for download for free, and just any ideas that I have. I would like to do research on that, so if anybody has any ideas for how I could do research on this topic, please email me. And if you happen to see it online, then please make a comment so I know you've seen it. Thank you so much.